Life Audio.
Hello, and welcome to the Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic podcast. I am your host, John Seidel. This is your home for real stories, radical vulnerability, and remarkable comebacks. In the end, this podcast is a place for the desperate, the downtrodden, the destitute, and especially the drunk. But it's also a place of hope and healing. I know that firsthand because I'm the Christian who became an alcoholic, not the other way around. Today, I've found sobriety after decades of struggling. But more importantly than finding sobriety, I found Jesus. My prayer is that as I interview people just like you and just like me, along with professionals in the fields of trauma, faith, and addiction recovery, you will find the peace that is available to you through Christ on the other side of whatever you're going through and whatever addiction that might be. Because let's face it, we're all addicted to something. So welcome. Let's get radically vulnerable as we explore what it looks like to be on this journey of messy sanctification. We'll be right back after this. I want you to think about this phrase for a second. I feel shame. I feel shame. Now, the words, I can almost guarantee you that the words of that statement are not what you actually believe. I feel shame. Most of us, when we hear those words, we actually mean that we are thinking about shame, that it is something that is happening in our minds. But in fact, shame is something that really starts in our bodies. How do I know that? Well, I know that because of my conversation with our guest today, who practically needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyways. His name is Curt Thompson. And when it comes to shame, especially from a Christian perspective, he is the guy. And so to the first point that I made to open up this podcast, he says, and he will say in our podcast today, that shame is first and foremost not a thing that begins with me thinking a certain thing about myself. It begins as a thing that I feel literally in my body. And that is just one of the many incredible insights you are about to glean from Curt. I was speaking at a conference this past weekend, and I gave two talks, one on radical vulnerability, which Curt will talk about vulnerability, and one on the idea of messy sanctification, that we're all on this journey, whether we realize it or not, of becoming more like Jesus. And in one of my presentations, I had a quote from Curt in it. And the conference director goes, I think Curt Thompson has been quoted more than the Bible at this conference. And that is because the work that he's doing, and this conference was especially for people who were coaches and counselors, right? So the work that he is doing in this space of complex shame is so important and so groundbreaking for the church. And he approaches it with such a soft and empathetic tone. I got the chance to be at a conference with Curt in the beginning of 2025, beginning of this year. And he blew my mind with just the way that he talked about so many topics that are relevant to addiction and recovery. Shame is one of them. Vulnerability is another one. Trauma is another one. And we are going to get into all of that today with him. He has been so gracious to give us an hour of his time, and I just can't think of a better person for you to sit with in the next hour, for you to understand what is going on inside of you when you do the things you don't want to do, and then when you feel shame about them, especially. So before we get to that, though, listen, we are 1 week away from the launch of the Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic book. And so I just want to take a minute. This is as direct as I'm going to be. Will you please go buy the book? Not for me, but for you. Not for me, but for those you know. Not for me, but those that you can give hope to, and the hope that I want you to have. Even if you just have an inkling, a thought that maybe I need to reevaluate my relationship with alcohol. But also, if you just think that maybe you need to reevaluate your relationship with anything in your life that you feel like has started to occupy a place that you don't want it to occupy. If you want to understand addiction better, if you want to understand yourself better, if you want to understand God better, would you go please buy the book? You can go to christianalcoholic.com. This is the last week for the pre-order special from the publisher, and this is an incredible deal. It is 40% off plus free shipping. You cannot get that at Amazon. It behooves me, I've said this before, for me to send you to Amazon, right? Because on the day that the book publishes, all those orders hit, and you hopefully go to number one in several categories if you buy the book on Amazon. But I don't care about that. I don't care about that as much as I care about getting this into your hands. And because I really do believe that once you get it into your hands, it will change your life. Not because of me, not because of what I have written, but because of what it says about God, right? What it says about the truths of Jesus and this world. So please, one last time, go to christianalcoholic.com, and pick up the book. With all that said, now let's settle in for our conversation with Dr. Curt Thompson. It could be truly life-changing for you. Let's go. Curt, thank you so much for joining the Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic podcast. This is such a treat for me, as someone who I have read and who I included in the book. That's just some of the stuff. I think I probably had to dial it back a little bit, because who wants to just read a book about what Curt Thompson did, to help you? So publishers don't really like that, Go figure. So I'm really honored to have you here today.
John, thank you so much. It's a pleasure. It's my honor. It's humbling to be asked. And I just want to say to your listeners, our listeners, that it's an honor to be on a call with someone who's working so hard at the things that you're working at. And because it's not easy. This thing about being human, it's just not easy.
And by the way, I think that's one of the things I really appreciate about you. When I saw you last January, I've seen a lot of people speak. I've talked to a lot of people on this podcast and just in other, and I think you seem to you wear your heart on your sleeve and you are living what you're talking about, right? And I think just so that people know as well, like that is I think such a gift and such a blessing. So thank you for that.
Well, thanks be to God. I think I have models for that, and so that's been whatever I offer, I would say is attributed to a number of people that have loved me well, and so I'm really grateful for that. Yeah.
Well, so I think a lot of people, you've written a lot. I think I'll say one of, not your most, because there's many, but one of your most popular works is The Soul of Shame. And I think that is where I'd like to go first. I think, when I look back at my story, the Christian that became an alcoholic, part of what kept me stuck in that was this overwhelming sense of shame. And so I think you talk about shame in a really helpful way. And so I'd love for you to unpack your definition of shame, especially in a Christian context.
Yeah. Well, I think I would say there's kind of two tracks to responding to your question. One is, I think I would probably say also, I don't so much, because I don't think we have necessarily a definition of shame as much as we can describe it when we see it happening. That's number one. That's one track of responding. And I think the other thing in your query about what does it mean as a person of faith, and I'll get to that in just a second. But we would say that shame, first of all, is an embodied neurophysiologic event. So it's first and foremost not a thing that begins with me thinking a certain thing about myself. It begins first as a thing that I feel literally in my body. It has certain characteristics. They tend to be disintegrating. If any of our listeners have ever felt ashamed, embarrassed, even humiliated, nobody likes this. Like, you don't need to shrink to tell you what it's like to feel ashamed. Like, you don't need me. Like, well, we all know, we get it.
Right.
And if I were to say, "Oh, do you like it?" Like, no. And it makes it difficult for me to do other things when I'm ashamed. I don't think clearly. I certainly don't create. I don't take the kind of risks that are helpful that lead to creative integration or wholeness. There's lots of disintegrating effects about it. I want to hide from myself. I want to hide from others. Literally, my physical response to shame is to turn away. I don't want to look at you looking at me.
Yeah.
Which is the complete antithesis of what we would say that every child comes into the world looking for someone, looking for him. And this is the antithesis of that. I don't want to look at you looking at me. It's too uncomfortable for me. So I'm not just trying to turn away from a thing. It's not just that I think that I'm not enough or inadequate and so forth. All those things are the cognitive manifestations of it. But it first and foremost is this thing that's happening to me physiologically. And then it can lead to all kinds of downstream consequences. I turn away from you. I turn to those things that most quickly can help me cope with this, that can disseminate this, that can like get rid of it, diffuse, like lessen it. What can I do to reduce my neurophysiologic response to this? Of course, we can find a range of things that we do in response to this. I can, become an addict on one hand. I can end up in jail. I can commit all kinds of violence in one direction in response to become angry, become all these things. Or as it turns out, we tell the story of the 10-year-old who comes to his dad for the first time he gets a grade in math that's above 90%. Here's my 92%. And dad asks, well, where's the other 8%?
Mm.
And so you're like, oh, come on, Curt, that's not child abuse. No, it's not child abuse. But 8 years later, when that son is 18 and he is a 5-star athlete and he is a straight A student, he will still be looking for the 8%. And on the outside, everything looks like he is packaged and wrapped really, really well. But internally, if you ask him, how do you think you're doing? He's like, yeah, I haven't gotten the other 8%. I'm still looking for the 8%. This is the rich young ruler, especially, right? And especially in Mark's gospel, this notion who's looking to like, what must I do to get you to love me?
Yeah.
And so it can take on lots of different coping strategies. This is how we respond to shame. But also what's important is that, we can look at this from a neurophysiologic standpoint, like what does it do? It disconnects me from within me. It disconnects me from you. When it becomes embedded in a social network, we look for victims. We look for scapegoats. We are going to shame. This is what they did with Jesus, right? We're going to do this to others. We've all been in groups where we're making fun of somebody else because we can't tolerate our own discomfort with ourselves. It becomes a destructive, disintegrative force in the social fabric. All these kinds of things can happen. And it is so primal, right? There's a reason why we hear it on the second page of the Bible. They were naked and unashamed. Right? The writers could have said they're naked and happy, they're naked and content, confident, whatever. They're giving us a word that alerts us to what's coming that will thread through the rest of the text. But then we have this other question. So, and again, you don't have to read the Bible to get a sense of what it's like neurophysiologically and interpersonally when we have this phenomenon that takes place. But we humans are storytelling creatures. We don't have any experience within our bodies that we don't then move to make sense of what we're sensing. This is how we tell stories. We human beings are continually trying to make sense of what we sense. This is what the brain's doing 24/7. Even when in dreams, like you wake up from a dream, you're like, what's that mean? What's going on? I have these things that are so weird and all.
Right.
So I'm going to make sense of what I sense. And this has to do with how we tell stories. I'm reminded of a patient of mine that I've been taking care of now for a number of years, who first came to meet with me, and he was a guy supremely successful, lots of different ways. Except he was also very, very anxious, and he's kind of looking at his own life. I'm not really quite sure why I'm so anxious. I shouldn't be anxious. And we asked standard questions about like, what's life growing up in your house, and he offers kind of one of the answers that we get. Like, I grew up in a loving Christian home, which is kind of code for a number of different things. And then I asked the question, we go on through the evaluation. So who was in charge of discipline in your house? And he thought for a minute and he said, well, I guess that would have been my mother, because whenever my father would get involved, my father who was a deacon in the church, then things would become violent in the kitchen. And so we go back and we say, so help me. You just said you grew up in a loving Christian home. Now we're saying we can't really upset the apple cart because then violence breaks out in my house. Help me understand how this is the story that you tell.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we then do as storytellers is that we then come up with stories to make sense of this. And so our 18-year-old who got the 92%, but that wasn't enough on his math test, if you ask him, who are you trying to be? Like, I'm trying to be a better version of myself. And like, like 5-star athlete, like straight is like, how can you be a better version? He's telling a story that drives him to be who he is. And like that 18-year-old, give him a few years, he'll be in my office. Because he's telling a story that isn't just his version of what is true about the world. He's telling a story that enables him to cope with his shame. And we're all doing this. Adam and Eve were going to tell a story. And the story that they told after they eat the fruit is, we have to hide because the other person that I'm now with is not, it feels dangerous to me. Steve feels dangerous to me. He feels dangerous to me. I'm going to say this to God. Adam says to God, the woman you gave me, I'm afraid. We're storytelling. What we're doing is we're trying to make sense of, we're trying to regulate this that we feel. And, and God is coming to try to help them tell their story more truly. And he's asking a real question, where are you? And Adam can't answer his question. He won't engage in the conversation. He just kind of moves further and further and further deeper into the woods. That eventually, God's saying, like, okay, I guess, like it turns out like you can't actually live in Eden anymore. You're not able to, like, I need to ask you to leave because like you're not going to be able to tolerate Eden. But you can't. And so this is where like the whole act of regeneration and reconciliation and salvation, all the Asians that we have in our Christian lexicon are all about getting us ready for heaven, right? This is Lewis's motif, C.S. Lewis' motif in The Great Divorce. This is when Dallas Willard says, God will let anyone into his heaven who can take it. And a significant part of that is our willingness to allow God to rework the narrative that we tell ourselves as a way to cope with our shame.
So I think especially, I'm curious your thoughts. What is it about the addict that the story, is it as much the story that we start telling ourselves because we know we're engaging in something that is so destructive or that we shouldn't be doing, or that, fill in the blank? Or is it the story that we had been telling ourselves and now we're trying to drown that out? It's just that shame component is so strong when it comes to addiction. And I'm just curious what you found is as to, and this is going to be such a big question, but why? What is it about it that addicts especially just seem to get so caught up in that shame cycle?
Yeah. Well, it's one thing that we talk about, John, we talk with our patients about their addiction to shame. That shame becomes a thing that is really hard for us to extract ourselves from.
Interesting.
And you're like, well, wait a minute, Curt. Like, you can't be serious. Like, who's gonna like want to do like emotional nausea? Like nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, gosh, I hope I feel more ashamed by the end of the day. No, like nobody thinks this. Nobody thinks this. But I would dare say that I don't know anybody, even, I remember when I was in training in Philadelphia, in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was at the height of the cocaine wars. And it was just every night in the psychiatric emergency room. It was just like one after the other, after the other. A person has gotten high on cocaine, and then they have this plunge into suicidal depression. They just come into the RER, one after the other. I don't know any of these folks, women and men, who after they spent the evening in our ER, and after we got them like stabilized, I don't know any of them who said, "Oh my gosh, I hope tomorrow I get to do more coke than I did today."
Yeah.
They wouldn't say, "I think that would be a great idea for me to put 2 vials of liquid coke into my veins as opposed to just 1 vial." Right?
Right.
They don't say that because it's not primarily my thinking brain that is involved in this. It is primarily a felt sense of discomfort that comes over me that I very quickly attach a story to. And so I think what I'm trying, one can imagine that what I'm trying to do is to deal with the story that I'm telling. When what I'm really first and foremost trying to do is to like cope with my body. I'm trying to cope with my body that very quickly in brain time, in nano to microseconds, is moving into the cognitive realm, moving into the imaginative realm. I feel discomfort, and I imagine the brandy.
Uh-huh.
I remember the aroma. There's all kinds of things that start to happen for me in this regard. So what this means is that when we are working with patients who are addicted to anything, we really do a lot of work around the whole question of sensations, images, and feelings. Certainly thought, but sensations, images, and feelings about what is it that I'm attracted to? What is it that I'm sensing? Oh, I can remember the aroma of the brandy, and I have a sudden wave of comfort that hits me right in the chest.
Yep.
And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like I know where the brandy is. And then we go, then we progress from there. Right. You know, the whole notion of pornography is often about an issue. It's not just about, I want to look at porn. It's I anticipate arousal.
Mm-hmm.
I anticipate a certain neurophysiologic event that I'm aware of. Its capacity for helping me leave whatever it is that I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
And so we'll say things like, okay, like we say like, why would we be addicted to shame? And they say, well, why would we be addicted to cocaine? Because if I say to myself, well, goodness, Curt, you should have just done that. You should have done that more effectively. You shouldn't have done that. You should do that. Right. This is what we're doing to ourselves frequently. And you say, well, Curt, is that helpful for you? So like, in other words, if you had your own shame attendant standing next to you throughout the course of your day, would you like it if that person every time said, Curt, you're like, what kind of idiot are you? Right. It's like, no, I don't want that. Well, then, but I say this to myself all the time. Like, why am I willing to say it to myself, but I would never hire somebody to say this to me? But I do, because at some level, and this is, we said earlier, one of the things that shame does is that it neurophysiologically gives me the felt sense that I am alone in the world with myself. So interpersonal isolation, if you will, like there is no interpersonal, there's only personal isolation. I'm cut off from others, which means I am my only resource. I don't have the advantage of co-regulation coming from you, John, who can look at me with empathy, and I'm going to allow you to look at me and let me exhale. Have you be curious? No, I'm alone. And if I am my only resource, one of the most common ways that we encourage ourselves is to crack the whip. If you only did this, if you should have done this, all the things that I can do, my self-contempt, my capacity for self-contempt is almost limitless.
Yeah.
And what's important about this is that it only further continues to cut me off. But I will tell you this, that the feeling that I have in the moment in which I am cracking the whip at myself, it gives me the slight reprieve from the actual feeling of shame itself.
Hmm.
And so it's kind of like, gosh, I have this raging headache that I can't, it's just so bad. So if I hit my fist against a wall and my fist is in pain, I don't like that. It's not helpful, but it distracts me from my headache, if only for a moment. And I'm paying it because the pain in my head is so bad. And so even though shame is categorically unhelpful in most situations, it's not to say that shame is bad in and of itself. Our problem with it is how we respond to it. But when it becomes the driving emotional vector in my life, I will find ways to distract myself from it. But in so doing, I typically only strengthen shame's cycle within me.
Yeah. We'll be right back after this. Wow. Didn't see that coming. That is so, that is so interesting, and so like now I'm thinking back, right? And you start thinking back, and first of all, yes, I mean, how many of us, like, the things that we say to ourselves, we would never say to our worst enemy,
Right.
and we just heap it and heap it and heap it on ourselves. Before we move to something related, I want to ask you this. You talk about how vulnerability is really one of the ways to heal that shame. What is it about vulnerability that helps us move through that shame? And then the follow-up, I guess, would be, how especially can men embrace that? I think some people have told me, like, John, you're a little bit odd because you're a man and you're not afraid of vulnerability. And I'm like, I get it. First of all, I am, right? We're always, I feel like all of us are holding something back, right?
Right.
You just don't know what I'm holding back.
Right.
So what is it about vulnerability that's healing, and how can men especially embrace that?
Yeah. Well, John, I sometimes, I just think about some common experiences that we have in life. You got to have open heart surgery. And if you're going to do that, like, you're going to have to get naked on the table if the surgeon is going to get to you. That's just, there's no two ways about it. And then we hear Jesus come along and he says, I didn't come for those who are well. I came for those who are sick. And furthermore, he might say to each of us, I didn't come for the parts of you, Curt, that are well. I'm coming for the parts of you that are not well. And those are the parts that you are working really hard to make sure I never see.
Yes.
The woman in Mark 5 who comes and she has a plan for her healing. She has a bleeding problem and she has a plan, right? It's kind of like my patients come to see me. They come to see me and they already have a plan for what they kind of expect and want me to do. And her plan is kind of like commando healing. We're going to get in, get the job done, get out. Nobody gets seen. Nobody gets hurt. Nothing happens. Nothing. And then, Jesus, she tugs on his cape and then all hell breaks loose, right? Because he says, stop, who touched me? And she's like, crap, this is not going the way it was supposed to go. Because her plan for healing did not involve, it was the antithesis of vulnerability. I'm going to do everything I can to not be seen.
Yeah.
And I think I can get away with that with Jesus. And then he stops. He says, who touched me? Like, why does he have to do this? Like, why wasn't it not okay? Like, you think of all the people that he healed, blind, lame, and so forth. And he said, like, you're healed, like, go your way. We don't have a recording of, like, lots of other conversation taking place. Just go your way. There is this sense in which Jesus is just well aware that all of us, we who are alcoholics, we who are porn addicts, we who are heroin addicts, we who are addicts to our phones, we who are addicts to our thrill seeking, we who are addicts to our jobs, we who are addicts to the life that we are living so as to avoid ourselves, right? In this sense, like, we're all addicts, right? Jesus comes to us and we have a plan. And then he says, stop And we're like, what? Who touched me? And like, he's not moving.
Yeah.
Right. And notice he's not moving in the middle of a story in which his presence is urgently needed someplace else.
Right.
Right. And so like, if you're the woman, you're like, my God, like, okay, like I just got to find a way to get out of here. And he's not moving. And like, you're aware, like if he doesn't move, like, okay, now what's going to happen? And then she says, and the text reads, with great fear and trembling, she came and bowed before him. And here's the kicker. And she told him everything there was to know about her.
Mm.
She told him her whole story in front of everybody. Because the thing is, okay, so she heals, so her bleeding gets healed. But like, then what? She doesn't have a family. She doesn't have kids. She doesn't have a community. Like she's going to go back and like, no, really, I'm clean. Really, believe me. I'm like, who's going to believe this? Like her bleeding is just the beginning. Like it's just a doorway into the house. And Jesus is not satisfied with us in this way. He's not satisfied just with like the front door. Like this is, he's coming for all the different parts of our story and he'd be healed. And so this notion, like, look, as humans, we are the only people who put clothes on ourselves. The only people that have to. I know we know there are people who put clothes on their dogs. That's a little weird. We get that, right? But okay, fine. It's okay, really. It's for those of you who put clothes on your dogs, right? It's not the question of like, am I vulnerable? It's like, in what way am I going to be?
Mm.
Because the degree to which I am willing to be vulnerable is the degree to which I actually model Jesus. The healing that takes place on Good Friday requires the Son of God not just to be stripped naked, not just to be beaten, but to be hung on a cross in front of people, up close and personal, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because the Romans' purpose was not just to humiliate the victim, it was to humiliate the culture, humiliate the citizen, humiliate everybody, like to let everybody know it's not just, we're not just telling you we're in charge, it's we're in charge and you are nothing. This is what we think of you. This is what we will do to you. And it is the embodiment of like ultra accusation, right? Jesus doesn't agree to the Satan's terms when he has him in the wilderness. All you need to do is bow before me and I'll give you all these right. nations. And evil's like, fine, you won't do this. Like, here's what I'll do. Because evil doesn't see Easter coming. Evil thinks this is what it can do. And so the whole notion of when Jesus then in John 20 says, so in the same way that the Father has sent me, I'm sending you. We read that text and we're like, okay. And we have our little, our evangelism tracks and like, we're going to tell the story about the gospel. And we kind of forget that whole that commentary of Jesus in John 20 is embedded between two stories. He first shows his wounds to the disciples. And then just a few verses later, Thomas, he's in the room with Thomas and he takes Thomas's hands and he puts them in his own wounds. And then we have to remember, in the same way that the Father has sent me, I'm sending you. But the world will know that you love me because you bear your wounds to it. And to each other. You don't do it on Instagram. You're not doing it on Facebook. Like Jesus didn't, before 500 people, just line people up and say, here, come line up. I'll put your hand on my side. Like there is intentionality. There is intimacy. It's wise. It's careful, but it is clear that one of the most powerful ways that we declare the gospel is through the vulnerability of our wounds. And as it turns out, when it comes to interpersonal neurobiological realities, the reality is just this, it is just the case that as I do so, we create the opportunity for others to be seen, to be soothed, to maybe feel safe, to feel empowered, to have their own stories. Like how many times have I been in the room where somebody reveals their vulnerability and it is harmonic with somebody else's vulnerabilities that they didn't know. Absolutely. Somebody starts to, they find themselves weeping. They're like, I don't even know where this is coming from. You're like, you're right. Because you've been working so hard for so long. In the same way that the woman was, right? She has her story. Like, I've got all this planned. I know what my problem is. Vulnerability is not part of the solution. And Jesus is like, oh, sister, do I have plans for you?
Right. Right. So when it comes to that vulnerability, I think, maybe someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, I'm willing to go there, but where I'm having a hard time is, what is the difference between a crushing shame that keeps you stuck and a godly grief that propels you to action? And I'm listening to this and I don't trust myself anymore. I don't know. Maybe I'm the guy addicted to shame, Curt. Like, what is that difference between those two? I know there's a difference, but I can't find that nuance.
Right. So two things. So one, perhaps you're actually referencing 2 Corinthians 7, right? And this is either Paul's words. There is a godly grief that leads to repentance, and there is an ungodly grief that leads to death. He doesn't just say ungodly grief that leads to a more difficult life.
Right.
This brings us back to this awareness that from the second page of the Bible, we recognize that shame is a built-in part of the created order. It is a neurophysiologic signal to us that something is wrong. So there's something going on within me, between you and me, in some way, shape, or form. And so it's important to know that shame is a necessary part of what it means to be human in order for us to live fruitful, flourishing lives. There are plenty of behaviors that we see in our world today for which shame is the appropriate response, and people don't demonstrate it. There are things that people do for which they should be ashamed, and they're not. And the fact that they're not means that it propagates other shaming and shameful behaviors in others that only tends to spread the disintegrating effects of these kinds of behaviors. So it disintegrates social fabric and so forth and so on. And when we read Paul's text, this text in 2 Corinthians, what I'm hearing him getting at, like, look, what if Adam, in his experience, when God comes calling in Genesis chapter 3, where are you? What if Adam had just walked out of the woods and said, I'm right here, and I have really, really screwed things up. And frankly, I'm scared to death to talk to you because I'm worried you're coming to kill me. And I know you might have to talk to her, but she's not the problem. First of all, I didn't tend the garden. I just allowed the snake to come in the garden. I didn't keep the snake out of the garden. I let him talk and I didn't say a thing. Do with me what you will. Can you imagine? You can imagine God the Son turning to God the Father and oh my gosh.
Did you hear that?
Can you believe this dude? This amazing.
Yeah.
Right. So there is an option for us, and we would say that there is a godly grief that leads to repentance. And that godly grief, we'd like to say, look, Jesus doesn't come announcing first the leading edge of the gospel is not that we are sinners in need of a savior. Look, nobody needs to tell me that I'm screwed up. Nobody needs to tell me that I'm a sinner. I don't need that from the pulpit. I don't need that from televisions. Because here's what happens to me, right? And we think we need to let inform people of their brokenness. You're like, oh, really? As if people don't know.
Right.
That I'm not aware. But I'll tell you what does crumple me is when Jesus comes to me and loves me so deeply and then says, and now I'd like for you to forgive your enemies. I'm like, crap. Now I would like you to stop holding a grudge against these 7 people. I had to make a list last year about the people that I've been holding a grudge against. This 10 people that I had on my list. And now I would like for you to become a person of patience and goodness and kindness and so forth and so on. And I'm like, so this is Kierkegaard when asked once, are you a Christian? He said, I'm trying desperately to become one. That's my answer. Like, am I like, no, I'm a professional sinner. Like, you know, it's when love demands things of me that I'm like, no, I can't, because I can tell you I'm broken because I can't do these things. And this is where shame, like and this is where we say, like, yeah, shame is leading to godly grief, which leads to repentance. Okay, we're going to work on moving in a different direction. And ungodly grief, this is what we would say, ungodly grief was taking place in the Garden of Eden. Yes, no question. They feel grief. There's something, they're grieved. And what do? They turn inward and away from God and away from each other. Cain, one chapter later, right? He's grieved. And what does he do? He kills his brother. Well, violence upon violence upon violence. This is what we do. This is ungodly grief. This is what we do to Jesus. We are grieved. We are grieved. And so we will make you the scapegoat for our grief. We're going to ask you to take responsibility for our stuff. But what Jesus is asking us to do is to grow up enough for us to allow him to take on our brokenness. It's not easy to do, by co-regulating with us. It means I'm going to have to come to the table and say, this is the place where I'm going to have to come and be vulnerable. I'm going to have to come and say, I'm going to be just like you. And I'm going to take my jacket off and show you where my wound is and take the risk. This feels risky, because will you stay in the room? Or will you look at my wound and gather with others and point to it and say, what kind of an idiot are you? As the Father has sent me, so I'm sending you. But notice, he doesn't say this to an individual. He's saying this to a community. And so when we say, well, gosh, John, how am I supposed to, no, I don't practice vulnerability. We help me practice vulnerability.
Yeah.
We help you practice vulnerability. If I'm going to forgive my neighbor, we are going to help me forgive my neighbor.
Yeah.
We are going to help you love your enemy. This is Trinitarian theology embodied in the church.
Wow.
Right? Jesus doesn't do anything but that he sees his Father doing it. Right up to the very end.
Yeah. We'll be right back after this. There was something you said a few minutes ago that I'm so glad you brought up, because when I heard you say it, and I've since looked at it more, and I know you're not the only one to talk about it, but you talk about these 4 core needs: to be seen, soothed, safe, and secure. And I can't tell you enough what that unlocked for me. You talk about our stories. I mean, I'm literally sitting there and I'm almost instantaneously, I'm so much of the story that I've struggled to tell or struggled to understand just made sense. And so, I mean, we could do 70 podcasts on this, but can you unpack just briefly then for us, what is it, these 4 core needs, and why do we need them so bad?
So we talked about these 4 words, these 4 core needs that all happen to begin with the letter S. So we talked about the 4 S's. I have some friends in our practice who are kind of expanding on that. I love what they're doing just in terms of taking the last S that we'll get to and kind of breaking that out into some other words that I think are really words that get at what this last word means. We'll talk about that last word in a second. But we basically say that over the course of our lifetime, this is not just for newborns, infants, toddlers. This is for all of us. It continues. The first thing that we need as human beings, we would say, we need to be seen. Every baby comes into the world looking for someone looking for him, looking for someone looking for her. And if a newborn is not seen, literally, we put them on the table and they die. But my need to be seen is still the case when I'm 50 years old. When I'm in the boardroom, when I'm in the lunch line, I want to be seen. Whatever the context is, I long to be. I'm looking for someone looking for me. With joy, begins. It's a newborn. And I'm looking for someone who's looking to see me as I really am. With joy, but as I really am. I was a before I was anything, I was a source of anxiety for my parents, literally because I was the fourth of four kids, but my parents had kids at 18, 16, 11 years of age. My mother became pregnant with me at age 44. And in 1962, if you're 44 and you're pregnant, you're worried.
Yes.
Right? So when someone comes into the world, when you come into the room, when you're seen, are you seen? How are you seen? Right? The woman with the bleeding problem, she didn't want to be seen at all. Jesus is like, nope, that's not what we're doing here. We're going to give you the experience of being seen. So we long to be seen. We would say, well, gosh, if you come into the world, like what newborns need, they need to be soothed. What are the ways in which, we might ask to our adult listeners, right? Who are the people by whom you're being seen deeply? Who are the people, if we were to ask, who are the 2 or 3 people who collectively, they can tell us everything there is to know about you because you're so deeply seen and known? Number 1. Number 2, where are the places that you long to be soothed? Like, I have this part of me, for real, I have this part of me that believes he's unwantable. Kind of comes with a generational thing. There are lots of reasons why that is, but I have the felt sense of unwantability. And it shows up in the room every now and then in ways that are not very pleasant or very helpful for me. That part needs to be soothed, but okay. But then I feel embarrassed that I have this part of me that needs to be soothed. So forth. What are the parts of us that need to be soothed? Because if we are not naming these and they are not being soothed in ways that are integrative, in ways that are strengthening, in ways that are building resilience, as opposed to, oh, I'm going to look at porn and be soothed. I'm going to drink and be soothed. Ways that are actually disintegrating, ways that have me becoming less and less mature, not more mature. If I'm going to be seen and be soothed, over time, I come to feel and experience what it means to be safe. Now, to be safe, it's a word that we're kind of often misappropriating these days by now in our culture. Sometimes we'll hear people say, I don't feel safe, when really what they're saying is, I really don't want to do what you're asking me to do.
Right.
I don't really want to become more of an adult. I don't really want to take responsibility for what I need to do to resolve this issue, to repair this rupture. I don't feel safe, so I don't have to do anything. Everything has to be done. We're not talking about that. We're talking about 2 ways of becoming safe. One is, as a newborn, as a child, like, I have to be protected from outside elements, from things outside my skin. That's what a parent, and some of us have grown up in homes where I wasn't protected from things. I wasn't protected from my parents. I wasn't protected from all kinds of things. It created all kinds of internal distress for me. And so I'm not actually safe in that way. I'm walking around feeling like the outside world is dangerous. But the other thing that parents are doing, even if they're doing that well, one of the other things that we have to do is we have to actually protect our children from themselves. Right? I'm a 2-year-old, like, dude, I'm going to run into traffic if you don't stop me. I'm going to have all kinds of impulses. I have things within me that are dangerous if left undisciplined, if left unformed. And that's still true as a 62-year-old. Like, I can have things within me if given the right set of wrong circumstances. You put me in the right set of places where I'm going to look at something I shouldn't be looking at, or, consuming too much of something I shouldn't be consuming, whatever it happens to be. Like, I become the danger. And so that also has to create safe. So what are we doing? When we read in Hebrews 12, therefore let us throw off the sin that so easily entangles and distracts us. What is the thing that I need to protect myself that's outside my skin? What are the things from within me that I need to be attentive to, not to condemn them or shower contempt upon them, but to say, like, oh my goodness, the part of you that really wants to look at porn, the part of you that wants to consume time on Instagram, the part, like, what is it? Oh, I'm looking for comfort. I'm looking to be soothed. But that means I'm going to have to restrain that. And then the last is, if I'm seen, soothed, and then I'm comfortable and confident. Remember, to be safe does not mean that I never face danger. It does not mean that, like, I never fall down and skin my knee, or like I can be a toddler and cut myself in my house. It doesn't mean my house is dangerous. But if I do those first 3, I then come to a place what we would call, you become secure. And to be secure means that we are doing what is necessary with those first 3 words to then call out a child to move into the world, to take the kind of risks that are important to take. So we're going to commission the child, we're going to call the child, we're going to equip the child to do things that are going to be risky, properly risky. They might get their knees scratched, their nose is bloodied, and their feelings hurt. Things are not going to be in this world. We live in a world of tribulation. In this world, you have tribulation. But I've said these things to you so that in me, so that when they go out in their secure, right? They built their boat, they're going to go out into the ocean. If they're under trouble, they know where they have a place to come back, to return, to be seen, soothed, and safe. This cycle, being seen, soothed, safe, in order to securely launch out, to push the boundaries of Eden into the wilderness, to create icons of beauty and goodness. This is what it means. When God comes to earth with Jesus, he's taking risks. But he is secure because he's not doing this by himself. In fact, nobody gets out alive. We're not so secure that we're going to survive this earth, but we do believe in a resurrection that is commissioning us into security that is past the grave. But the way that I'm going to do that, even as an adult, is if I'm doing that in a community that is enabling me to recycle these 4 S's over and over and over and over again. And the byproducts of this become the Sermon on the Mount in an embodied way. They become the fruit of the Spirit. They become living, breathing, purposeful forgiveness. They become those people who the world will look at and glorify our Father in heaven. Not because we're perfect, but because we're not.
Right.
But we're living vulnerably, recycling these 4 S's over and over again.
When you told that, when I saw you talk about this, you also talked about and you applied it in a way to the story of David. And I know we don't have time to get into that, but I wrote an article based on what you had said, and I'll link it in the show notes. But there's just this beautiful way that you unpack this that I was able to see David in a new light, not excusing his actions,
right?
But explaining them potentially, and then in seeing David in that new light, I was able to see myself in a new light.
Yeah.
It's just so beautiful. It's so beautiful, and so thank you for unpacking that, Curt. You know, you've written so much and you've done so much great work. If people do want to learn more, if they want to figure out what you're doing next, maybe where you're speaking, where can they go?
Yeah. Well, thanks, John. You can find my work on my website. It's curtthompsonmd.com. You can, I think one of the ways that people can get access to the work that I do, probably the easiest and that we're hearing is effective, is through a podcast, the Being Known podcast. That I have a co-host with, Pepper Sweeney, and our co-producer Amy Chella, which has been a lot of fun to do. And I think that's an easy way in for folks. So it's the Being Known podcast, my website, and then there's work that I'm doing through a nonprofit called the Center for Being Known that's developing confessional communities that are lay-led, along with an annual conference that we have. And then I have a practice, New Story Behavioral Health, that's here in Northern Virginia, that people can learn more about how we're doing training for confessional communities and intensives in this way. So for the lay public who are interested in those kinds of things, in which we deal with a lot of the topics that you're talking about here on your show. Well,
Curt, you obviously your calling card is being known, and I think I just want to affirm and then say how much I appreciate how much you make yourself known. And if you are listening to this and you have a chance to see Curt in person, or listen to his podcast, read his books, I'm telling you, they can't not be helpful because they're rooted in Scripture. I think that's one thing that you that is obvious through our conversation is what you do is rooted in Scripture, and then you're in a sense unpacking and giving us a new lens to see Scripture, and it's so great. Curt, thank you so much for joining the show. I really appreciate it.
John, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on it.
The world will know that you love me because you bear your wounds to it. That's good. That's good. Recently, meaning this week, I was being interviewed on a podcast, and someone asked me to respond to the idea that some people raise, the objection that some people raise to being called an alcoholic for the rest of their life. And I get that sensitivity. And I don't pretend that if you've struggled with addiction that you need to use that label for the rest of your life. I have chosen to. Why? And this was the question. And this is my response. I have chosen it because Paul chose it. I have chosen it because Matthew, the disciple, chose it. Two quick things. Paul is always talking about how much of a jerk and derelict and a-hole, really, that he is. He's always talking about how messed up he was and how messed up he is. The thorn in his flesh, how weak he is, all of that. Paul is the quote-unquote Christian alcoholic. He is the guy that's like, I'm just going to boast in my weaknesses. That's why I use the term. Second, Brennan Manning says this and pointed this out in his book, The Ragamuffin Gospel, and I think it's really powerful. He says, when all the other gospel writers talk about Matthew, they say Matthew. They use that term, that name. But when Matthew talks about himself in the gospel, you know what he does? All the time. He says Matthew the publican, which is Matthew the tax collector. Tax collectors were so hated and despised in Jewish culture. And here Matthew goes around and in his own gospel where he gets to write the narrative, what does he say? Matthew the publican, Matthew the tax collector. Your wounds bear testimony to what God has done in your life. My wounds bear testimony to what God has done in my life. And the world will know that you love me, Jesus, because you bear your wounds to it. Because the world just wants to pretend that they don't have wounds. They want to pretend that everything's great, that everything's fine. Christians, people who know they are in need of a savior, have no problem bearing their wounds. That's why I have no qualms about calling myself the Christian alcoholic. And so, when Curt talked about that, Curt is the one that said that. The world will know that you love me because you bear your wounds to it. I just resonated with that so much, and I continue to resonate with that so much. If you enjoyed this conversation with Curt, can you let me know what exactly you enjoyed? I'd love to know. You can message me on Instagram. You can message it on Facebook. You can respond to the comments in Spotify or Apple. And please, if you enjoyed this today, certainly I ask you to like, rate, subscribe, all that stuff. But will you share it with one person? That's my request. Share it with one person who needs to hear something, even if it is 2 minutes or 30 seconds of something that was said in this podcast. Will you please share it? Send it to them. Text it to them. I want these words to heal because they are the words that Jesus has given us. So with that said, can you also, if you have a chance, visit lifeaudio.com. Lifeaudio.com has some other great podcasts. They are the one that makes this podcast possible. And I'm so grateful that they took a chance on this, and 75,000 downloads and 21 episodes later. You guys, I think, have made their gamble pay off. So thank you. Go ahead and check them out. Love you all. We'll see you here next week.